My name is Robert Cywes. I'm trained as a pediatric surgeon and a general surgeon, so I come from a surgical perspective. And what happened is I got kind of sick and tired of operating on kids for what I call endpoint disease, gallbladder disease, reflux disease, polycystic ovarian syndrome, and realized that all of these came from the fact that these kids were ginormous. They were huge. And we weren't able to address the underlying problem, which is their obesity and the thing that caused them to become heavy. So because of the endpoint surgery I was doing, I became interested in what caused these kids to become fat and unhealthy as children. Children shouldn't develop those diseases. So I became interested in obesity and realized everything that we do is wrong. So from my patients, I learned that the majority of the stuff they were eating was sugar and starch. And even though we were being told to do that, the kids that ate more and more of that became sicker and sicker. So we started working with carbohydrates and using surgery as a tool to help these kids to do better and to focus on the changes they were supposed to make. So while we still focus tremendously on the ketogenic diet or the non-carbohydrate diet, we use surgery as a tool to help them to be consistent, and when they do fall off the wagon, and everybody does, it prevents them from regaining the weight. So I'm mixing surgery with my weight loss program. We've been doing this fairly intensively for about 15 years. In fact, it's a prerequisite for my group of patients that in what I call pre-care before surgery, that they begin to make attempts to adopt a low carbohydrate diet. And the problem with obesity is that it's a real struggle. You basically have to kill your best friend, and you've got to hate being fat more than you love carbohydrates. The love of carbohydrates doesn't go away. So we've got to get people to begin to make changes. And as you've heard so many people say, it takes a good 2 to 3 months to initiate that divorce or that deprivation. And it takes a long time to get into the success phase. So what we do in our program is to use the low carbohydrate diet, and we've been doing that for 15 years now. And then we interrupt that diet by doing surgery, which gets them to eat less. That's your calorie reduction. And if the surgery is doing that automatically, then they can really focus on the stepwise changes to their diet. It's very easy for an athlete to cut carbohydrates out in any given day. It's incredibly difficult for an obese person to do that. So we work with the fatties, not the fitties. And there's a big difference, okay? And it really comes down to the reason why people use carbohydrates. The athletes use carbohydrates to potentially, in an erroneous way, give them an advantage. And we realize it doesn't. The fatties use it as their primary form of endorphin management. That is where they get pleasure, they get stress resolution, they get boredom management. All of that happens with this wonderful drug called carbohydrates. It's a beautiful, wonderful thing that makes us feel great. The problem is when you do it in a dominant and excessive way, it causes problems. And only when the problems supersede the pleasure are you willing to begin to anticipate a change. So in our program, the patients need to begin to make those changes, need to begin to address it. I don't care how successful they are. And then we use the weight loss surgery to help them to further that. And then there's aftercare where they extend that. Once they start to lose weight, we then introduce other ways to handle stress, other ways to handle boredom and give them pleasure. Now, not every fat person has to be an athlete. So for some of them, it can be going for a walk or participating in some form of sport. But others prefer music and reading and writing. Others prefer photography, artwork. A lot become involved in their church. I don't care what their new fortress of solitude becomes. But every obese person, that fortress of solitude, as Superman said, is the fridge and pantry. We want them to divorce that and then find other places. So the surgical community who's calories in, calories out obsessed ostracizes me because I'm ketogenic and that's so bad. How can you tell people to eat fat? The ketogenic community hates me because I operate on fluffy little kids. How can you operate? How can you do surgery? How can you do this horrible destructive surgery on these kids? Well, guess what? My answer to them is this. The ketogenic people find it very, very difficult to sustain weight loss in their population. No matter how wonderful and how correct your idea is, if people can't do it, you're screwed. You might as well not have it. And on the surgical side, no matter how great the weight loss is, if you can't sustain it because you haven't changed why you became fat in the first place, and these kids lose a lot of weight and then they gain it back, or what's even worse, they can't eat so they become malnourished. When you're eating purely carbohydrates, you're not getting in good nutrients. So you become malnourished, and in their 20s and 30s, we're dealing with kwashiorkor and marasmus like I used to when I was in South Africa. Both sides have a problem. If you marry the two, if you use the ketogenic diet, which improves health, but you make it sustainable because the surgery makes it sustainable, it makes a difference. So the percentage of patients I have successful and the degree of their success is enhanced by marrying the ketogenic diet with surgery. And I would like to see the message go out that this is applicable both for the fatties and the fitties, and really get that consensus that this is a human way of life.